In this video, we're going to learn how to solve simple trinomial equations by factoring. So let's start with, how do we know if we're working with a simple trinomial equation? And we know if we're working with a simple trinomial equation if the x squared has a coefficient of 1. So if you don't see a number in front of the x squared, you can treat it as an invisible 1. And that's how we know we're working with a simple trinomial equation. Now let's talk about how we factor them. So in order to factor them, I like writing out the acronym MAN. So M-A-N. And the M stands for multiply, the A stands for addition, and the N stands for numbers. So we always want to multiply to the last number over here. So we're going to multiply to negative 20. And we want to add to the middle number, so the coefficient of the x term. And remember, if you don't see a number there, it's because there's an invisible 1 there. So in this case, we want to multiply to negative 20, and we want to add to 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to think about the factors of 20. So 20 could be broken down into 5 times 4. And because you're multiplying to negative 20, you know that one of these numbers has to be negative. But because we're adding to positive 1, it's the 4 that's going to be negative. So the numbers here are positive 5 and negative 4. So what are we going to do with those numbers? Well, let me just clear this so that we can start with a clean slate. We're going to plug those numbers back into the equation. So we're going to make two brackets. Both of those brackets are going to start with an x, and then they'll have the numbers from over here. So one of the brackets will be an x plus 5 because of the positive 5, and the other bracket will be an x minus 4 because of the negative 4. Now, because this equation is equal to 0 and you're dealing with two things being multiplied by each other, you know that either the first term, so x plus 5, has to be equal to 0, or the second term, x minus 4, has to be equal to 0. And then you can solve for x by, for the first one, subtracting 5 from both sides, which gives you x is equal to negative 5. And for the next one, we can add 4 to both sides. And that will give you x is equal to positive 4. Now, what we just found, because if you think about this, we're looking at when is our quadratic equation equal to 0? What we just found are our x-intercepts. So we know that we have an x-intercept at a point of negative 5, 0, and we know we have another x-intercept at a point of 4, 0. So two x-intercepts in this case, one at negative 5 and one at 4. Let's look at another example and see how that one goes. So very similar thing here. We want to solve the quadratic equation by factoring, and we're going to follow the same process. So I'm going to write out MAN, so multiplication, addition, and numbers. And remember, you always want to multiply to the last number. In this case, that's positive 36. And you want to add to the middle number. In this case, it's negative 12. And then think about what your numbers are. So we're going to write out the factors of 36. And when I think about two numbers that multiply to 36, I think of 6 and 6. Can we get them to add to negative 12? Yes, if they're both negative. So negative 6 and negative 6. Negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36, and negative 6 plus negative 6 is negative 12. So those numbers work. We are then going to put them back into the two brackets. So x minus 6 equals 0. And because these brackets are the same, you can also write this as x minus 6 squared. So what does this mean for our graph? Well, when we look at our roots, we have x minus 6 equals 0. And solving for that by adding 6 to both sides, we get x is equal to positive 6. So this quadratic equation only has one root. And if you think about how that looks, we would be left with a graph. Just going to sketch this graph very quickly. So this graph would have one x-intercept at +6, and that x-intercept is also the vertex of the quadratic function. So the function would look something like this with our x-intercept at 6. Perfect. Let's look at the next one. So for the next one, you may think, this isn't a simple trinomial. There's a number in front of x squared. And in order to factor using the MAN method, there can't be a number there. Well, if you look very closely, you can see that we have 2, 12, and 18. And 12 and 18 are divisible by 2, which means we can start this problem by factoring out the 2. So I'm going to factor out the 2 from this equation, meaning I have x squared. The 12 gets divided by 2, so it turns into a 6x, and the 18 gets divided by 2, so it turns into a 9. And that is equal to 0. So now we've taken this, and by factoring out the 2, we've turned this into a simple trinomial problem. So now we can factor it using the same method. We're going to see what two numbers multiply to 9 and add to 6. And your two numbers, so 9 can be 3 times 3, and those numbers add to 6, so that works. So your numbers are 3 and 3. And just subbing them back in, we get 2x plus 3 times x plus 3. And again, because those brackets are the same, we can write them as 2x plus 3 squared equals 0. So similar situation to the last problem. And then solving for that x-intercept, we get x plus 3 is equal to 0. And then we can subtract 3 from both sides, and we get x is equal to -3. So this quadratic function has one x-intercept at a point of -3, 0, and that x-intercept is also the vertex. Let's do one more, and this one involves a fraction in the beginning. So when we have a fraction, same thing, we're going to factor it out. We're going to turn this into 1/4. And remember, when you are factoring out a number, you're dividing by that number. So we're going to try to do 2 divided by 1/4. And remember, when you are dividing fractions, you keep, change, and flip. So keep the 2, change the division sign into a multiplication, and then flip the last fraction into a 4/1. So 2 divided by 1/4 is just equal to 2 times 4, which is going to be 8. And then you could do the same thing with the 3. 3 divided by 1/4 is equal to 3 times 4/1, which means in this case we're working with a 12. So plugging in those numbers now, we have 1/4 x squared plus 8x plus 12 is equal to 0. And then we can use the MAN. So two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 8. And we can play with the factors of 12. So 12 can be 4 and 3, but that won't add to 8. It can be 6 and 2, which does add to 8. So those are the two numbers we're putting there. I'm then going to take those two numbers, put them back in. So this turns into x plus 6, x plus 2 is equal to 0. And then setting each bracket equal to 0, I get x plus 6 equals 0, and also x plus 2 is equal to 0. And then looking at both sides, we can subtract 6 from both sides here, which will turn this into x is equal to negative 6. And on the other side, we can subtract 2, which will turn this into x is equal to negative 2. So the solutions, or x-intercept, to this quadratic equation are x is equal to negative 6 and x is equal to negative 2.